Good morning, fellow Kenyans, and I see a few friends of Kenyan. Sorry, maybe one day I'll learn protocols, but I hope we can apply different protocols, surely. I do not have to catwalk for 3 minutes. It is part of why we are here, because people have wasted critical time that we have paid them with our taxes. Catwalking, bouncing, showing off their shoes. And as a result, many other people have no shoes or food. So I am hoping with the People's Conference and the People's Economic Model will be different and socialist. But having said that, karibuni sana, and thank you for heeding the call to join us for this People's Economic Recovery. Allow me to give you just a bit of a background of Okoa Uchumi and why it has taken us this, why we are here. And most of the people who are members of Okoa Uchumi, my teachers of the economy, who I am seeing on this side, they will tell you this conference is 4 years late. It is 4 years late. That we ought to have spoken to our leaders, called them out for what they have done to this economy. And 4 years might be an understatement. So in terms of the economy, Okoa Uchumi, particularly led by the institutions that are economic think houses, think tanks for this country, they informed us around 2016 that we are in problems. And they said, unless the Jubilee government, somebody stops them and tells them to stop borrowing to steal, borrowing to go on holidays, we will be in such a deep economic hole that we cannot recover. And they also took a radical shift from bilateral and multilateral borrowing, where the interest rate is usually minimal and oftentimes way below 10%. They opened up the economy and borrowed for the public at very, very high interest rates. When you're given the economics, and the one thing I like about what Ruto said, at least alifanya tuelewe, alisema for every shilingi 17 zinalipa deni. So you're able to understand. But when these economic think tanks first introduced to us the problem, it was in billions and trillions. To be honest, I have never even prayed to God to give me $1 billion. I have never. Because what would I do with it? What would I do with $1 billion? So based on that, it becomes very difficult to unpack what it means that somebody has taken billions and stolen them, has borrowed, we will repay this particular interest. But particularly for TISA and institutions that were working on devolution, what shocked us was every time we were in court saying, division of revenue, give counties their money, then we would be told there is no money because all the money is servicing debt. That was early as 2018. The media was still not very convinced that we were in a crisis. Even Kenyans were saying, you're exaggerating. COVID came and it gave us a reprieve, because back then the president was able to put COVID measures. We went everywhere. We are a developing country. We've been hit hard. We were able to postpone the problem. Now, the last year, unfortunately, some of us were given the task of leading Kenyans around the budget process and thereafter the Finance Bill and the Finance Act. You spoke to members of Okoa Uchumi across the country, and you're like, we cannot be taxed anymore. No employer is increasing salaries. We cannot afford capital. We gave our input. And the government initially promised that they would cut the budget. Because if we keep, by the way, fellow Kenyans, Wangwana, anytime you hear a cabinet secretary of finance has come forward and has announced that we now have a higher budget than last year, go and mourn, because it means you have a higher debt to pay and ultimately higher fees and tax to pay. We have continually increased our expenditure without the required fiscal discipline. The Controller of Budget was to join us today, and she would have told us in great detail the fiscal indiscipline, but she's not able to join us due to some unavoidable circumstances, but you have been following what she has been saying. And based on this, what happened during the Finance Act and the measures, finally the 16% kicked in. Sindio? And we saw what happened. We were told subsidies will now be for production, not for consumption. And the rains have come, we've prayed for them, so you will have food to eat. So Kenyans continued to pay tax. But the last year, our schools are closing without disbursement of their capitation. Our public secondary schools are the next team that will have pending bills this year, because head teachers are not able to pay suppliers. Anyone who works in the health sector, and I know the trade unions working there, but they are community health workers here. Previously, most of the scandals were in the medical services, because there was even leftover money after stealing to allow some stealing and buying of medical equipment and medical supplies. This year, that particular department has faced budget cuts. So, wacha vile mulikuwa munalia kwamba kuna dawa chache. Ukienda hospitali, shukuru Mungu. If you get a doctor who is able to diagnose you, for now, enda ununue dawa huko nje. My mother has hypertension and she has been using one drug for the last several years. For the longest time, I bought that particular medication for $8.50. My most recent purchase of the same medication, same brand, same specification was $1,500. That is what cost of living means. Based on all this, we kept wondering, hii deni tulipe? Because nobody wants to default. Do we want to default? Would you want to default on debt? No. If you took debt, the honorable thing to do is to pay the debt. But what if paying the debt kills you? You default because life is sacrosanct, right? Now, why we are here is because if we must pay, we have already defaulted. Fellow Kenyans, we are already in default. I am not an economist. I am not an economist. But I know government civil servants who worked, teachers who are retired, they contributed pension religiously for over 35 years, right? Wakakopesha serikali hiyo pesa yao ifanye nayo biashara. They are not getting their pension. Is that a default or not a default? It's a default, right? If we are not submitting statutory declarations, are we in default or not? We are in default. Where we have not defaulted is that at least China has given us one penalty. The Eurobond, we are working very hard to pay it. We do not want to default out there. Are we together? As a country tumeamua tutaoga tujipake mafuta hata tukiwa na njaa. Whatever happens inside can collapse, but the outside world will see that we are strong. So we are going to die because of ego. But even as we default, what debts are we paying? The standard gauge railway that never hit any consolidated fund account in Kenya. Yet, luckily in this room there are many drafters of the constitution, so nikiulizwa swali, drafters please mukuje na historia. All money that is borrowed for the Kenyan people must first go to the consolidated fund. The Eurobond that we are paying this year, watu walikula mudomo. The former auditor general huko akatuambia yeye hajaona hiyo pesa. Governor wa Central Bank akavaa miwani akaitafuta hakuiona. Na hii mwaka we are paying the who has our money? Who has our money? And if other countries like Mozambique that are not at the level of people power and democracy that we have are able to declare such debt illegal and odious, kwa nini sisi tunalipa? Why are we paying and punishing the next generation? Comrades wa universities, are you here? Muko wapi? Wako huko nyuma? Unajua mtapata help sababu lazima tuibe deni. And so based on these realities, I was approached by very many people. We hesitated, we held our breath because a few people had hopes. NADCO used to meet here. You know that? The National Dialogue Committee. They sat here, they took views about Kenya and cost of living. Then in the report, they were unable to write it. We are here because as Kenyans, we know what we want for our economy. We need to tell them what they must do in terms of corruption, accountability, and fiscal discipline. It is the reason we are here. And in the past few months, we've been combing together with IEA and other Uchumi partners, our institutions, and in particular the Auditor General and Controller of Budget, have flagged this consistently for 10 years. They are supposed to help us through parliament, lakini parliament imefunga mapua, imefunga macho, imefunga masikio, haioni. They are still creating new funds. New funds. Ward Development Fund, Senate Oversight Fund, constitutional anchored CDF, when there is no money. Yet the work of oversighting, the questions we are asking here, we hope we can ask parliamentarians to give us a refund. Because if there is somebody who has betrayed this country and the Constitution, it is our members of Parliament. And if nothing else comes out of this place, we need to make sure that the next budget cycle, our members of Parliament stop the ushenzi and stand up for Kenyans. I no longer want to speak about this, so we are here to hear. Munataka tulipe ushuru kiasi gani? Deni kiasi gani? Tufunge nani jela tukifuata sheria? Sindio? Who should even be in office? Tuuze KICC? Am I the new matatu ya mafuta, KPC? We sell our KPC? Is that what we want? What is happening to our minerals, which we have as a country? Those were my opening remarks, and I'm reminded by Kwame Nkrumah. He said, Africa, Kenya included, has inherent economic independence. But the divisions that we keep seeing on the basis of tribe, on the basis of religion, gender, and so on, are geared towards extracting and stopping us from enjoying our economic independence. The bulk of our problem is with our political class, but it is because we are still operating with the colonial mindset, and the colonial governments still have a leash over us. So if we have a way of redeeming ourselves, we will be rich enough, and as Jason has taught me, Africa must become a rule maker and not a rule taker. Please, if we do nothing else, the people of Africa, not the politicians, set the rules for our economic recovery, and we've lined up experts who will help us with the technical thinking. But because you know where it hurts, and we know the solution, we don't need to keep it too technical. So give us all your inputs, and then we have people here who are very good writers, so haitapotea kama NADCO, na agenda zetu si mingi. Ni uchumi peke. If we are able to, and I am a human rights advocate. Zamani nilikuwa naongelelea sana katiba na human rights articles. Lakini wakati nilirushwa upande ya pesa, nikagundua wachananga na KDF. Please look at the people who own money. Those people hold so much power to either facilitate human rights or take them away completely. So far, where we are in terms of the economy, all we are doing is violating human rights day in, day out. Not even the right to housing, where we have been told we must pay. We are still violating that particular right, bringing down houses, not ensuring the security of tenure. So it is time we focused on who is holding the Kenyan purse, and if they cannot carry it well for us, tuichukue tujieke. So thank you very much for honoring this. And sorry, one last thing. We didn't know that we would get this room full. But Cyprian akaniambia, Diana, unafikiria ni nani anaenda nyumbani? Who is going home for Christmas? Mko na fare kwenda Christmas? Mko na fare kwenda Christmas? Kwani ni Christmas, ndio? So today, as we will get several other hashtags, but one of the major hashtags is hakuna sikukuu. Hakuna nini? Hakuna sikukuu. Sababu, one, hatuna fare, hatuna chakula, si ndio? Hata hatuna madawa. Hata hatuna mahali pa kukopa fee ya January. Si ndio? So based on that, and let me tell you, we may be announcing that this year. But unless you people define the economic path we are going to take for recovery, next year will be more painful. The medium-term revenue strategy paper that was presented, one of the things that I took away is there is now going to be introduced a 5% withholding tax on all produce that are taken through cooperatives. So ukiuza maziwa yako kwa cooperative, we take 5%. Majani, even before we decide the cost of fertilizer, labor and everything, 5%. How do Kenyans organize? cooperatives. If you have bad leadership, they tax your air, they tax your breath, your house, your stomach, your death, and they don't bury you and don't give you services. If we have bad leadership, who are the people who can correct it? Having said that, karibuni sana tu kongamano la wananchi la kuokoa uchumi.